Hello, literature lovers. Today I want to discuss literature of the Enlightenment period, that is the 18th century, the age of reason. It is characterized by its ardent support for humanitarian realism, rationalism, and opposition to traditional theology and doctrinal positivism. The art and philosophy of this period is influenced by the social transition from feudalism to capitalism. The movement, which was crowned by French Revolution of 1789 to 1794. British history starts with it. The House of Stuart from 1689 to 1702. Mary II ruled, and its increase of the power of Parliament, the expansion of the British Empire, opposition to the French, abolitionist monarch Louis XIV, and wars with French 1702 to 1714, and there was the second daughter of James II, liked but not very clever. Union of Scotland and England took place in 1707. All her 17 children died young. The House of Hanover 1714 to 1727. George I, German grandson of James I, and spoke little English and didn't like England. Conspiracy of Jacobites to restore the House of Stuarts. Their rebellion defeated. Then comes 1727 to 1760. George II, war with Spain for the excess of rebellion. Second Jacobite rebellion with Charles Stuart at he head. Defeated. War with France for control over Canada and India. Next comes 1760 to 1820. George III. The Industrial Revolution accelerated. England turned from an agriculture into a predominantly manufacturing country. Australia was taken from British Crown. War with America, and British acknowledges American independence. The age of enlightenment became the period of educating people. The representatives of the Enlightenment believed in people's abilities to better their own lives through knowledge. They criticized religion with its dogma of the inborn vice of man, the society, the state, and made reason the only virtue. The positive hero of their art absorbs their belief in the man's nature, their historic optimism. Materialist philosophy of Locke, Diderot, and others formed the basis for the ideas of the Enlightenment. Though in England they were less radical than in France and Germany, the peculiarity of English Enlightenment lies in its double nature, in a combination of materialistic ideology with the promotion of egotistic bourgeois value and morale. The antique art once again becomes a source of inspiration for the writers of the Enlightenment, but unlike the Renaissance, they use it to depict the reality of their days. Their aesthetic views were centered around issues of moral and religious virtues. They estimated the political perspectives of Burgess progress as optimistic, the only exception being obviously Swift, a bitter satirist of the diseases of his society. The Enlightenment in England was not a homogeneous period, rather, it fell into three phases: early Enlightenment, high, and then late Enlightenment. The first period dates between the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and 1730s. The literature of this period is mainly presented by Alexander Pope, Richard Steele, and Joseph Addison. The works by Daniel Defoe and Jonathan Swift became most popular. They mark the appearance of the realistic Enlightenment literature. Classicism being the reading literary trends. Its most typical genres are drama, poem, and essay. The ethnic views of the representatives of early enlightenment are optimistic. They feel positive about perspectives of Borges' development. Jonathan Swift stands aside. His satire is bitter exposure of various vices of his contemporary society. The literature of the second period, that is the High Enlightenment, is mainly characterized by the rise of realism and realistic novel. It represents by the creative works of Samuel Richardson, Henry Fielding, Tobias Smollett, and all. The late Enlightenment is connected with development of sentimentalism and pre-romanticism. It is presented by the creative work of Lawrence Stern and Robert Burns. Unfortunately, the English theatre between 1700 to 1800 stands as a whole in unhappy contrast with most of which what is recognized as artistically valid in the world work of this epoch. It was a matter of chance that so few playwrights of genuine talent and none of unmistakably genius flourished at this time, but conditions governing everything was such that by 1700 English social life had already come under the influence of Borges' new middle class of merchants and bankers come to power, which was no doubt an unsuitable soil for the genre of high tragedy. Besides, the Puritans' moral restrictions and law about the theatre censorship adopted in 1737 showed down the development of English theatre. They are the works characterized including She Stoops to Conquer and Joseph Addison's Cato, and they are also including Dryden, Gay, Fielding, Goldsmith, Sheridan, George Leroy, glorifying the Borges, and all his works being characterized here. Next comes the John Gay, all the works related to it are there. A new genre of the 18th century English drama was the so-called ballad opera. The best sample of the genre was created by John Gay, a poet and a playwright famous for his burlesque comedies. The idea of his most successful ballad opera, The Beggar's Opera, was suggested by Swift. Gay used it to create a witty and ironical play about the criminal city district and its inhabitants, thieves, beggars, and the like. The characters of John Burnwell's represent crime and hope for the God's forgiveness, but the victorious Manfred is not remorseful. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.